If your soul is eternal, why do you fear death? This is the question that haunted Albert Einstein, a question that stuck with him, and his answer reveals something they never wanted you to understand. Because here's the paradox nobody talks about. You claim to believe your soul will live forever. You say death is just a transition, a new phase. You tell yourself there is nothing to fear. And yet something inside you recoils at the thought of dying. Something primitive, something that can't be reasoned away. Something that wakes you up at 3 a.m. with a cold sweat and a racing heart. Why is that? If you truly believed your soul was eternal, you would face death with the same calm you face drifting off to sleep at night. You would see your final breath not as an ending, but as a doorway, a new beginning. You would welcome the transition the way you welcome the sunrise, but you don't, and Einstein knew exactly why. In the last years of his life, Einstein became obsessed with a question that most physicists avoided like the plague. Not about atoms or energy or the fabric of space-time, but about consciousness itself, about what happens to awareness when the body stops working, about whether there is something in us that physics simply can't explain. What he discovered changed everything he believed. See, Einstein wasn't a religious man in the traditional sense. He rejected the idea of a personal God who answers prayers and judges souls. He dismissed what he called the fears and absurd egoism of feeble souls who need to believe in heaven to cope with mortality. But here's what they never tell you. Einstein didn't stop there. He didn't simply reject religion and walk away. He kept digging. He kept asking questions. And what he found was far more disturbing than anything the churches or the scientists were willing to admit. Let me explain. In 1950, Einstein wrote a letter that was never meant to be published. It was addressed to a grieving father named Robert Miller, whose son had recently passed away. In this letter, Einstein revealed something extraordinary. He wrote, "A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness." Optical delusion, or cognitive illusion. Einstein was telling this grieving father that the separation we feel from the universe isn't real, that the boundary between your body and everything else is an illusion created by your consciousness, that you're not a separate being looking at the cosmos. You are the cosmos looking at itself. But if this is true, if the separation is an illusion, then what exactly dies when your body stops working? Einstein continued, "This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. A prison, or more accurately, a trap." Einstein was describing your sense of self, your feeling of being a separate individual, as a trap, a cage constructed by your own consciousness. And death, in this understanding, isn't the destruction of something real. It's the dissolution of something that was never really there in the first place. Think about that. The fear of death is the fear of losing something that doesn't exist. The terror you feel is the prison trying to convince you that the bars are real, your ego screaming that it matters, that it's separate, that it will be destroyed. But Einstein saw through the illusion, and here is where it gets even more disturbing. In March of 1955, just 1 month before his own death, Einstein received devastating news. His closest friend for 50 years, a man named Michael Bell, had passed away. They had worked together at the Swiss Patent Office. They had discussed physics and philosophy for decades. Bell had been the sounding board for Einstein's greatest ideas, including the theory of relativity. Einstein was devastated, but the letter he wrote to Bell's family contained a message that has puzzled scholars ever since. He wrote, Now he has departed from this strange world a little ahead of me. That means nothing. People like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Read that again. The distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Einstein wasn't speaking metaphorically. He wasn't offering empty comfort. He was describing what his own theories of physics had revealed to him. That time itself, the very thing that makes death feel like an ending, isn't what it appears to be. In the four-dimensional space-time that Einstein's relativity describes, the past isn't gone. The future hasn't yet to happen. Everything that ever was and everything that ever will be exists simultaneously. Your birth and your death are both equally real, equally present in the fabric of existence. This is called the block universe theory, and it means something profound about death that most people have never considered. If time is an illusion, if past and future coexist in a single eternal present, then in what sense can death be an ending? The you who was 5 years old still exists. The you who will take your last breath already exists. They are both equally real in the structure of space-time. Einstein knew this, and he faced his own death with a serenity that shocked everyone around him. When doctors told him his aortic aneurysm would kill him, they offered surgery. Einstein refused. He said, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly." This wasn't the attitude of a man afraid of annihilation. This wasn't someone clinging to existence with desperate terror. This was someone who had seen through the illusion and understood what death really meant. But here's the question that should be keeping you awake at night. If Einstein saw through the illusion, why do you still fear death? What is it in you that refuses to accept what physics has revealed? Why does the primitive terror persist, even when you intellectually understand that the self is an illusion and time is a persistent delusion? The answer takes us into territory that Einstein himself was deeply ambivalent about. You see, Einstein was fascinated by the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza, a 17th century thinker who was excommunicated by his own religious community for ideas that were considered heretical. Einstein said, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the harmony of all that exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fate and doings of mankind." But what did Spinoza actually believe? Spinoza argued that God and nature are essentially the same thing, that there is only one substance in the universe, and everything, including your mind and body, are expressions of that single substance. He called this Deus sive natura, God, or nature. Albert Einstein was captivated by this idea because of one specific implication. Spinoza said that the soul and the body are not two separate things. They are two different expressions of the same underlying reality. Albert Einstein put it this way: "I'm fascinated by Baruch Spinoza's pantheism. I admire even more his contributions to modern thought." Baruch Spinoza is the greatest of modern philosophers because he is the first philosopher who deals with the soul and the body as one, not as two separate things. One, not two. Think about what this means. For centuries, philosophers and theologians have debated whether the soul can survive the death of the body. They assumed these were two separate things that could be separated, but Baruch Spinoza and Albert Einstein after him rejected this assumption entirely. If soul and body are two expressions of the same underlying reality, then asking whether the soul survives the body is like asking whether the front of a coin survives the destruction of the back. The question does not make sense. This is crucial, because if the soul and body are one, then the question changes completely. It is not whether your soul survives the death of your body. It is whether the distinction between soul and body was ever real in the first place. And this brings us to the heart of the paradox. The fear of death is hardwired into your biology. Evolution spent millions of years building neural circuits that scream danger. When mortality approaches, your brainstem and amygdala are designed to keep you alive at any cost. This is not something you can simply think your way out of. Psychologists call this mortality salience, the awareness of your own death. And research shows that when people are reminded of death, they become defensive. They cling more tightly to their beliefs. They seek comfort in group identity. They push away anything that threatens their sense of meaning. This is called terror management theory, and it explains why humans have created elaborate belief systems, religions, cultures, and legacies. All of it, according to this theory, is an attempt to manage the terror of knowing we will die. But here is what the evolutionary psychologists miss. If you were nothing but a biological machine, if consciousness were nothing but electrochemical reactions in neurons, then the fear of death would make perfect sense. The machine does not want to stop running. End of story. But the fear of death has a peculiar quality that does not fit this explanation. It is not just the fear of pain. You could handle pain. It is not just the fear of the unknown. You deal with unknowns every day. The fear of death has an existential quality that goes beyond mere survival instinct. It feels like the fear of losing something essential, something that cannot be replaced, something that should not end. And Albert Einstein understood why. The fear of death is the fear of the ego, losing its illusion of separateness. It is the trap walls, trembling at the thought of their own dissolution. It is the cognitive illusion of consciousness, fighting against the recognition that it was never real in the first place. Your fear is proof, not proof that death is real, proof that the illusion is powerful, proof that you have identified so completely with the trap that you cannot imagine existence without it, proof that the separation feels so real that the thought of its ending triggers primal terror. But what if you could see through it? What if you could experience, even for a moment, what Albert Einstein glimpsed in his equations and his letters? In his final days, Albert Einstein worked on his unified field theory, pages and pages of equations, attempting to describe the fundamental structure of reality. He was not afraid. The nurse who attended his deathbed reported that he spent his last hours discussing physics and politics with the same calm curiosity he had shown his entire life. His last words were spoken in German, and the nurse did not understand them. They were lost forever, but perhaps they contained the answer to the question we have been asking. If your soul is eternal, why do you fear death? Because you have forgotten what you are. Albert Einstein wrote, "There are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle." The fear of death comes from living as though nothing is a miracle, as though you are a separate thing that came from nothing and will return to nothing, as though your consciousness is a random accident in an indifferent universe. But Albert Einstein's physics suggests a different possibility. You are not a separate thing. You are a temporary pattern in an eternal field. Your consciousness is not produced by your brain, any more than the picture on a television screen is produced by the television. The television is just a receiver, and when it breaks, the broadcast continues. This is not religion. This is what the equations suggest. When you follow them to their logical conclusion, the physicist Max Planck, who won the Nobel Prize and founded quantum mechanics, said something remarkable near the end of his life. He said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness. Consciousness as fundamental, not produced by matter, but the foundation from which matter emerges. Albert Einstein never went this far publicly. He was cautious about anything that sounded mystical, but his letters reveal that he was thinking along similar lines. The cognitive illusion of consciousness, the trap of the ego, the stubbornly persistent illusion of time, these are not the words of a man who believed consciousness ended with the body. And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. In The World as I See It, Albert Einstein wrote something that most people misunderstand. He said, "Enough for me the mystery of the eternity of life and the inkling of the marvelous structure of reality, together with the devoted striving to comprehend a portion, be it ever so small, of the reason that manifests itself in nature." The mystery of the eternity of life. Albert Einstein did not say the mystery of life after death. He did not say the hope of immortality. He said the eternity of life, as though life itself, consciousness itself, is eternal by nature, as though the question is not whether consciousness survives death, but whether it was ever something that could die in the first place. This is the truth, that your fear of death is hiding from you. You fear death because you believe you are something that can end. You believe you are the trap, not the awareness inside it. You believe you are the television set, not the broadcast coming through. You believe you are the wave and not the ocean. And your fear proves that the cognitive illusion is working. The more terrified you are of death, the more completely you have identified with the thing that dies. The more you think of yourself as only a body, a personality, a collection of memories destined to be erased, the more death appears as total annihilation. But Albert Einstein saw something else. He saw that the separation is not real, that time is not what it appears to be, that the soul and body are not two things, but one, that consciousness may be fundamental to reality itself. And when you begin to see this, something shifts. The fear doesn't disappear entirely. You're still running biological software that evolved to avoid death. But the existential terror begins to fade. The trap walls become transparent. The cognitive illusion becomes obvious for what it is. You start to understand what Albert Einstein meant when he said the fear of death is the most unjustified of all fears. Not because death is not real, but because you are not what you think you are. The you that fears death is the cognitive illusion, the you that watches the fear arise and pass away, the you that is aware of being aware. That you is not something that was born and cannot be something that dies. Albert Einstein spent his final years trying to find equations that would describe this deeper reality. He never finished, but his letters suggest he found peace with what he had glimpsed. If your soul is eternal, why do you fear death? Because you have forgotten that you are the eternal witnessing the temporary. You have become so absorbed in the movie that you have forgotten you are the screen. You have become so lost in the dream that you have forgotten you are the dreamer. But the fear itself is a reminder. Every time death anxiety rises in your chest, it is an opportunity to ask, what is afraid? What exactly does not want to end? And is that thing what I really am? Albert Einstein asked these questions, and his answers, scattered across letters and essays and conversations, point towards something extraordinary. You are not a body that has consciousness. You are consciousness, having an experience of being a body. And when the body experience ends, consciousness does not end with it. because consciousness was never contained in the body in the first place. This is the truth, hidden in the fear. This is what Albert Einstein saw, and now you see it too. If you have stayed with me through this journey into the deepest questions about death and consciousness and eternity, then you are not an ordinary viewer. You are someone who refuses to accept easy answers, someone who needs to understand. Channels that explore these questions, honestly, face constant pressure to conform, to simplify, to tell people what they want to hear. But you and I know that real understanding requires going deeper. When you click the super thanks button below this video, you are not just supporting a channel, you are voting for truth over comfort. You are saying that these questions matter, that the search for understanding should not be silenced. Your support is not a payment, it is a statement that says, keep digging, keep asking, keep revealing what they would prefer to keep hidden. Thank you to everyone who has already supported this work. You are the reason these videos exist. Now, let me tell you what Albert Einstein ultimately concluded about death. In his final year, when he knew the end was approaching, Albert Einstein made a choice that shocked everyone around him. When his doctors told him that surgery might extend his life, he refused. He said, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless and to prolong life artificially." This was not resignation. This was not depression. This was the serenity of someone who had seen through the cognitive illusion. Albert Einstein understood that clinging to life is just another form of the cognitive illusion, that the desperate attempt to avoid death is the ego fighting against its own dissolution, that the dignified approach is to recognize that you were never separate from the universe in the first place, and therefore you cannot be separated from it by death. He died on April 18th, 1955, with equations on his bedside table and peace in his eyes. But here is what most people do not know about that night. Albert Einstein's brain was removed during the autopsy, and for decades, scientists studied it, looking for the source of his genius. They measured its size and weight and structure. They counted neurons and mapped connections. They searched for the physical basis of extraordinary consciousness. They found nothing unusual. The brain that had revolutionized physics, that had glimpsed the nature of time and space and energy, was anatomically ordinary. His parietal lobes were slightly different, and some regions were more densely connected. But nothing that could explain his extraordinary consciousness, nothing that could account for the mind that had seen the hidden structure of the universe. Whatever made Albert Einstein who he was, whatever allowed him to see what others could not see, was not found in the tissue. The pathologist who performed the autopsy, Thomas Harvey, kept the brain for decades. Scientists from around the world requested samples. They analyzed it with every tool available. And still, the mystery remained. How did this ordinary-looking organ produce such extraordinary awareness? Or perhaps the question itself is wrong. Perhaps the brain did not produce Albert Einstein's consciousness at all. Perhaps it merely channeled something that existed before and continues to exist after. This is not proof of anything, but it is a reminder that consciousness remains the greatest mystery, that despite all our technology and scanning and analysis, we do not actually know how matter produces awareness, or whether it does at all. Maybe Albert Einstein was right. Maybe consciousness is not produced by the brain, but received by it. Maybe the body is a tuning device that allows eternal awareness to focus on temporary experience. And maybe death is not the end of awareness, But the end of that particular tuning, you will never know for certain, not until you get there, yourself. But you can know this. The fear of death is based on assumptions that may not be true. The certainty that you end when your body ends is not knowledge, it is belief. And Albert Einstein's own beliefs, developed through decades of rigorous thought, suggest something very different. You are not a temporary thing, afraid of ending. You are eternal awareness, temporarily forgetting what it is. And your fear is the forgetting. So, when you feel that cold grip in your chest at 3 a.m, when mortality presses against your consciousness with a suffocating weight, remember Albert Einstein's words. The distinction between the past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent cognitive illusion. You are a part of the whole, called by us, the universe. The soul and the body are one, not two. The fear of death is the most unjustified of all fears. These aren't just religious platitudes. These are the conclusions of one of the greatest minds in human history, Albert Einstein, a man who refused easy answers, who demanded evidence, who would not accept comfort over truth. If Albert Einstein could face death with serenity, perhaps you can too. Not by pretending the fear doesn't exist, but by seeing through the cognitive illusion that creates it, by recognizing that what you really are was never born, and therefore cannot die, by understanding that the cognitive illusion of consciousness is just that, a cognitive illusion, and perhaps most importantly, by asking yourself the question that Albert Einstein kept asking until his final breath. What is actually here? What is actually experiencing this moment? And is that thing something that could ever end? The answer is waiting for you. It has always been waiting. You just had to stop believing the fear. This is the question that divides everything. Either Albert Einstein was right, and your fear of death is based on a cognitive illusion, or he was wrong, and death really is the end of everything you are. What do you believe? Comment eternal if something in you recognizes the truth in Albert Einstein's words, if you feel, even for a moment, that the fear isn't pointing at something real. Comment mortal if you think this is just philosophical comfort for a terrifying reality. If you believe consciousness really does end when the brain stops firing. And tell me, have you ever had a moment when the fear of death suddenly lifted, when you glimpsed, even briefly, that maybe you are not what you think you are? I read every comment in the first 2 hours, and the conversation that happens here is often more valuable than the video itself, because this isn't about being right. This is about searching together. This is about asking the questions that most people are too afraid to ask. Your comment might be the thing that helps someone else see through their own fear. So share your truth, whatever it is.